The funny thing is, the one person they are very nice about is David Cameron. They feel like he's sort of he's had a couple of interventions where he's talked about, potentially recognising a Palestinian nation. So he's suddenly a hero there. They even said to me, this could be the moment, like Kosovo, where Britain ends up leading America towards sort of a better, more moral foreign policy when the Americans don't show up. So they see that as being a real moment of hope. Really interesting. I mean, I haven't heard anyone talk about David Cameron like that here. There's nothing they can do that's going to win them the election at this point. There was nothing that they could have presented, I think, yesterday, particularly given the underlying numbers. But stealing Labour's policy on non-doms, while it sort of leaves Labour in a bit of a mess and flailing, I don't know if it's great for the Tories. The only people I've heard in the last 6 months saying they will vote Tory have been either non-doms who are from the Commonwealth and allowed to vote, or people who are rich enough to have quite a lot of property in London who think the moment the non-doms thing came in with Labour, their property would go down, and therefore, they were all for propping up the Tories. I feel like they've just lost an entire constituency who were going to vote for them.
The last people.
The last people, and they're gone.
Can you vote if you're a non-dom?
If you're from the Commonwealth.
Excellent knowledge.
Yeah, no. I've literally heard this from several people who are sort of non-doms, and they were, worrying about having to leave the country if Keir Starmer got in. But now it's happened anyway. I don't think they're going to stick around long enough to vote at the election.
I think it was
really
a good move, really, the non-doms.
I think it had to happen.
Yes.
But
it is problematic.
But I think just as a political move.
I haven't seen it as yet, but presumably the Labour Party right now are clipping up every single time that Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak said this was a bad idea.
Yeah.
It would lead, it wouldn't raise any money. It would lead to... They were literally doing that like a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't make them look... If their big eye-catching populist idea...
Well, also, it just reminds people that the Prime Minister's wife will now have to pay more tax,
will have to pay
which
more.
has been an awkward sort of position for a while.
You could argue the other way. You could say, well, the Prime Minister's family have actually benefited from non-dom status. Nevertheless, he thinks it's right for the country that it should go.
Yeah,
but in terms of reinforcing the idea, they've essentially run out of ideas and road.
Yeah.
It doesn't scream.
It's not a great look.
Yeah, changey. But do you think he will be able to lead the Tories into the next election, Matthew? Rishi Sunak?
It's too late now to change. And I don't see any change that would be better than Rishi Sunak. His ratings are not good, nor particularly a Keir Starmer's, but on the whole, people don't think he's mad, which the last Conservative Prime Minister was. They don't think he's wicked, which the one before that one was. They don't think he's almost catatonically unable to speak, which Theresa May was. So, I think...
Turns out it's a low bar.
Yeah, it's a low bar.
Yes, yeah.
And actually, maybe going right back to... I don't know what version of Rishi Sunak we're on now. If we went back to Rishi Sunak 1.0, which was calm, steady, hard-working, diligent, decent, just getting on with the job, that's probably still his best bet, not for winning, but for limiting, a boring budget, saying we can't do much more, but we're doing what we can. We're going to try and fix things as we go along. That still feels like his best pitch, doesn't it?
His best. I mean, it's not a great pitch to win an election. I sort of, this is going to sound very cynical, I sort of think for everybody in the Tories now, it's much more about their best pitch for what they do after the next election. So I think basically he needs to do nothing catastrophic that will limit his job prospects and what he does after he leaves politics.
I wouldn't announce a tax on Meta.
No, that's what I mean.
On Facebook.
And what he's going to do after the election, too, I'm quite sure he won't stay. He wants to be remembered as someone who steadied the ship. I think that's the best he can hope for. Yeah.
Well, if there is anyone waiting in the wings who could replace Rishi Sunak, what about David Cameron, who popped up on Twitter this week with a video of him listing all the things he's been busy doing in his 100 days as Foreign Secretary. And all he seems to have done is reminded voters and Tory MPs that there's this sort of quite competent, hard-working, good communicator just waiting in the wings.
Yes. He reminds us of what we don't have anymore. We weren't crazy about him when he was Prime Minister, but you
don't know what you've got till it's gone, Matthew.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, no, I think he's doing well. He's got just the right sort of smooth manner and a sense of balance and proportion and precaution that looks good in a foreign secretary. I had this idea in a notebook I did for the Times the other day. Well, I didn't. A friend of mine, Sam Hogg, who does a Beijing to Britain China bulletin, suggested that what we need to do is steady and revive the idea of the free world, which was in the 20th century. Everybody talked about the free world, freedom's frontiers, all that kind of thing. There is such a thing as the free world, and a big a British Foreign Secretary tour of countries we know to be democratic, friendly with liberal values, just to congratulate them, basically, I think would be quite a good idea.
Well, with so many countries voting this year, you could go and welcome, make a point of meeting the new governments and all
That's
that.
That's a good idea.
Spend the year doing
that.
Yeah. I mean, I've just come back from Jerusalem, and what was really interesting is that when you speak to Palestinians there, they follow British politics very closely. They were very down on Rishi Sunak after his speech the other day. I had lots of Palestinian Christians.
What, the one in Downing Street?
The one where he came out on Downing Street, the big address about values. There was a lot of anger on the ground, a lot of sort of, you're not doing anything to stop the deaths in Gaza. A lot of Palestinian Christians saying, you haven't turned up, you haven't done anything to help with aid, you're not getting aid in, people are dying. And rather than criticising that, you're calling this Islamist. We're Palestinian Christians, thousands of us are dying by the day, and you don't notice it. Real anger on the ground. But the funny thing is, the one person they are very nice about is David Cameron. They feel like he's sort of... he's had a couple of interventions where he's talked about, potentially recognising a Palestinian nation. So he's suddenly a hero there. They even said to me, this could be the moment, like Kosovo, where Britain ends up leading America towards sort of a better, more moral foreign policy when the Americans don't show up. So they see that as being a real moment of hope. Really interesting. I mean, I haven't heard anyone talk about David Cameron like that here.
But he has his position, although he has, been full square, side by side with Rishi Sunak and all that, he has been nudging the lines. And there was a debate a couple of days ago in the House of Lords where he was quite critical of Israel and said, these are the tough questions that we need to be asking. Actually, in a way, and maybe it's because he's in the House of Lords, and maybe it's because he's a former Prime Minister, actually going much further than I think Rishi Sunak has.
He has already, certainly. Yeah. And I think he's almost the only person in the government who can get away with it. You couldn't really do it in the cabinet. They're all looking over each other's shoulders and thinking about the next leadership election. And Cameron doesn't really care about the next leadership election. He can't be sacked. He can say absolutely what he likes.
Do you think it's also partly because we know he's coming from the place of the mushy centrist and not sort of culture war-y, stirring upness? That actually, if Suella Braverman or someone said exactly the same thing, you'd think, oh, what's she up to? This, that's a dog whistle.
Well, she's gone the other way.
Exactly. But if the dog whistlers say things, then you immediately assume they're dog whistling. Whereas David Cameron is coming from the baggage he brings is different.
That's the point you make. That is the point, I think. Of him, you can't say what's he up to. He isn't up to anything.
Yeah, which definitely helps.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's a really odd moment where I don't think anybody in cabinet, everyone's just looking at the next election and survival. I don't think that they think about how this stuff plays out across the world. Across the Arab world, across the Middle East, across all the people we want sort of trade deals with, it's not going down well. And David Cameron is coming out as the only hero because they think he's the only one sort of sticking his neck out.
Well, it is interesting to see whether or not he sort of stretches even further and exerts more authority. But I mean, the other thing is, what he's done to restore his own reputation. It wasn't that long ago. Everyone was taking the mick about Greenshill and in the shed. He didn't know what to do with himself and lining his own pockets. And now he's, back as a statesman.
He's risen above shepherd's huts and all that kind of thing.
It's extraordinary. Maybe we'll see Rishi Sunak back in Keir Starmer's cabinet. There was somebody. Who was it who suggested? Was it George Osborne or Ed Ball suggested that Keir Starmer should keep him on?
Keep him on
as Foreign Secretary.
What?
I don't know if it was just designed to wind up David Lammy.
Also, I'm not sure his reputation has gone down very well across the world, so I'm not sure that would be an asset.
No, keep on David Cameron, not Rishi Sunak.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Fair enough.
David Cameron as Foreign Secretary.
Yeah, as a goat.
Bring back the goats.
Yeah.
That's what we want. We want more goats.